It's it's my big pleasure to welcome now Rachel Uva from School of Machines, Making and Make-Believe for a conversation on reimagining better futures and tools for collaboration. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Ella. Lovely to be here with you.
Hey, I'm super happy to see you here. And actually, the timing of this call is, or this conversation is actually ideal because over the course of the last 3 days, we came across so many complexities and things that, we have to reconfigure, we have to start a new, let's say, new way of tackling them. There is a lot of things we agreed to unlearn in various sessions. And now I really hope to do like a roundup together with you of all these learnings, because I know you have also followed large parts of the conference. But first and foremost, I also want to invite you to recap a little bit with me the class we did last year for School of Machines, Making and Make-Believe, that had exactly the same title as our conversation. And that was really one of the most inspiring things for me last year because I drew so much learning from it. And maybe we can touch base on some of the learnings and share them here. And maybe even we have some people following us that have attended the session. And those of you who are with us in the live stream, please join our website, the chat, and you can leave your questions there. I'm very happy to pass them on to Rachel. But Rachel, before we get started, can I ask you to quickly introduce yourself and just say a few words about you?
Yeah, thank you, Ella. Basically, my name is Rachel Uva, and I'm originally from the U.S., but I've been living in Berlin about 17 years, just about in like a month or something. And yeah, I started School of Machines, Making Make-Believe in 2014 after having organized many meetups and workshops and helping with conferences and things. And I wanted to find a better way for people to learn things that they take with them, and not just like that you learn in a weekend and you're like, okay, great, look, I learned this thing, and then you leave and you never, take it back up or whatever. So I'm really invested in like intensive learning experiences. And I guess that would be a summary for the most part.
Yeah, and that's great. And before we dive into our tools of reimagining and collaborating, I want to ask you, because I've been meaning to ask you for quite a while, what helps you to put this amazing curriculum together for schools of machine making and make-believe? Because your classes are very special and they provide, I would say, knowledge and tools that you can't find on regular universities and stuff. So what helps you to compile this knowledge and to create a curriculum?
I think that having experienced a lot of pain in life, basically, and it kind of like makes you pay attention to what's going on in the world and how people are suffering. And so I generally, I'm just like, what is going on now? Like, for example, the class that we are about to talk about, the tools for reimagining better worlds through cooperation, basically that came about because the pandemic happened. And I have been running the school for many years, and that's like my full-time job. And so when the pandemic hit and all my classes are basically like live in-person full-time classes, I was like, okay, what do I do now? And I thought that it's a really awkward time to be asking for money, asking for, putting something out into the world and asking for money when everybody was doing things for free for many months, like from the very beginning. And so, but this was my life. So I'm like, okay, what do I do? And I thought about the people that I care about, like you, Regine from We Make Money Not Art, for example. And I was like, there's such great knowledge here. And these tools, the knowledge that they have are tools for the future that we need to understand in order to kind of it just felt like the time to rethink everything. And so yeah, I think that it has to do with caring about other people and what's going on in the world, even more than myself, which I think is part of the topic that I want to talk about, even when we talk about like code of conduct, for example, because the reality is all these things are not about us, it's about everybody else. And that's part of what community is. And so I'm really glad that we'll be able to cover these things today.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I just want to add one more point that seems to be important for me. When talking about the curriculum for future learning, we should probably not only talk about the themes, but also about the methodologies of learning. And what I have experienced in this common project was pretty much a way of opening up a space for mutual learning that felt kind of good and new, because it was not, because usually you enter such an arena and you have the feeling, oh, I have to provide a lot of content so people are happy with the class and they have a lot to take away. But I think the challenge really lies into opening up a learning field where everyone is invited to engage in, and so you can discover all these things together. And one of the examples that emerged in this course, when we talked about reimagining better worlds through collaboration and cultures and tools that we might use for that, one of the things that only emerged in the communication with everybody was the importance of the code of conduct. Because before that class and before the pandemic hit, I didn't have it on my radar so much, maybe because I was running the physical space, and over the years, we sort of established some, guidelines and common agreements with people on how to be in that space. But we didn't really didn't pin it down or write it down or anything. But then when we all changed our programming onto Zoom or other platforms, it became even more obvious that we have to talk about it. And I think what's also interesting, over the past 3 days now of MoneyLab, we did not talk so much about code of conduct. But I really hope to talk about that with you. So what is your take on a code of conduct? Why do we need it? And why can't we rely on good atmosphere simply to emerge?
I think the reality is that humans are complicated, and we've all lived through many experiences that we still, as adults, can't even comprehend and don't even have words for. And so the thing is, if you have like 5 friends, or you have a community of 10, 20 people or something that you know intimately, like very well, that's one thing. But for these new kinds of arenas, for example, with like eco NFT communities that are, anybody who happens to, mint a coin can be a part of the community, or is technically a part of the community, and you don't know what experiences they're bringing to the table. And so it's kind of like to level the playing field. And also, it really came in handy for, I've been part of Creative Code Berlin community since the very beginning. And at some point, there was a situation where a mentally unwell person was stalking me, there are real life situations and real reasons to have these things in place, and real reasons to let everybody know what the rules are before. Actually, in the class, you mentioned a really great thing, which is a code of conduct is not there to be able to go and tell the, organizer, hey, look, this just happened to me, what do I do? But it's more like that the whole community understands what the rules of the game are, that everybody can like pay attention and look out and see something that doesn't look quite right and call it out. And so, because especially when we're talking about like decentralization and different models of community, there's no one leader that we can all rely on and go to. And so we need to start to think about these kinds of things in a different way.
Yeah, and also we probably it's about coming up with the words and, with specific situations that take place, because obviously I can't put myself in the shoes of another person, and I don't know exactly how it feels to be another person. So I think it's really important to share stories of where inclusion does not happen, or where people feel unsafe, in order to make everyone understand that these things happen, and they happen in our immediate surroundings. So I find it quite interesting that we talked a lot about community management in the in the past days, and we talked a lot about ways of building communities and activating communities, but actually to come up with a safe environment for everyone, to create such a code of conduct in order to avoid frustration or even people leaving the community simply because they face situations that are not okay. And I think that also shows that it's still not a widespread agreement that we actually really need code of conducts. And I'm wondering, like one of the learnings from our class, whether you started implementing that into your sessions, or what was your takeaway from that?
The code of conduct, you mean? I've been using a code of conduct, the Berlin Code of Conduct specifically, I think since 2014 when I started School of Machines. Mm-hmm. And I think that, again, the point is that it's not really about me, and it's not about, the immediate people in front of me, but it's like what can happen to other people when we're not paying attention. And I think another thing is that it also comes to the question of diversity, because, especially with a lot of these kind of tech and decentralized and NFT, blah, blah, blah communities, there are a lot of white men, let's be honest. And so the reality is, if we want to see more diversity in these spaces, the first thing that people look to when thinking about joining a community is like, do I see anybody that looks like me? And if you don't, then you're very hesitant. And so first we need to get more people, that are more diverse people there, so other people can feel that they belong. But then at the same time, they obviously have different needs. And so when coming up, like the code of conduct is not for the 10 cool people in the room that all get along and have seen each other's work for the last, 10 years online. It's for the new people that you want to bring in and you don't know what their experiences are. Any little thing can be a trigger for someone and you don't know. And if you don't have a safety policy in place, you just have people leaving your community. And then, it's just, the point is like, this pandemic moment is like a time to reevaluate, and like, if we say like, why do we need a code of conduct? Things are fine. But the point is, we want something better than what we have had. And so, and I think you brought up a really great point in the class, which was that a lot of the things we're talking about when we talk about community and cooperatives and different kinds of models of being together are not natural to most people. We weren't taught these things when we were kids. And so this is the whole kind of like unlearning, relearning thing that we're talking about, and it's kind of rethinking everything we thought in the past and trying to understand where did that come from. Like one example I have is, for example, in one of my classes, someone brought up the pronouns a couple of years ago. And I had never heard about pronouns before, declaring your pronouns in a space. And I remember at the time, even though I try to be open-minded and progressive, at the time I was like, but why? Like everything was fine before. But the point was actually everything wasn't fine before. It was fine for me, but it wasn't fine for other people. And so that's just an example of like that we all have to be open to being wrong about something and to like learning, relearning, unlearning all the things over and over again every day as new situations come up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this goes for a lot of things because we are right now in a huge moment of transition. I think that's really safe to say, right? So, adapting language and start thinking about our expression, start thinking about what it is that we want to bring across might feel like an effort for some people. But, I think we should always remind ourselves that there have been other people that constantly have to do this already because they don't live in safe environments and they can't be sure whether they can just say something and just put a message out there, but they really have to reflect before they say something, right? So this is a reality of many, many people around the world. And, also us being able to sit in front of the camera and just, sharing our minds in a very open way without having to fear for any form of prosecution, whatever, is a privilege in itself. So I think that's also something that we will have to tackle more and more in the coming years, that the freedom of speech and how to sort of lay the foundation for others to have some sort of freedom in what they say is also in starting to carefully think what it is that we want to say and how we are going to say it. So in Germany, we also have this, we have this huge debate around gendering. And it's basically the same as the pronouns, but it really, it demands from people to sort of reconfigure their language and really be inclusive also of basically everyone in society. And it's a huge discussion and not everyone is happy about it, but it almost seems as if this is something that will never go away, because it's just probably it's our state of where we are in our evolution as human beings, where we are called to do that, right?
Yeah, well, I like to say we've all been told different lies. And this is partially why, or this is the whole reason why everybody is on a different plane right now. Everybody's like having different ideas about what should and shouldn't be, because we've all been told different lies. And I think for example, like when I left the US and I came to Germany, it was a time when Bush was in office. And I hated him for so long. He was really the reason. Like the government in general was the reason that I left in the first place. And then I just realized, like, actually my hating him, like, he doesn't care if I hate him, but it's hurting me to hate him, And so I needed to start to think about other ways to do it, like other ways to be proactive in understanding how I feel and how I feel plays out into the world. Because I think also there's this thing where people don't realize, like, if they have issues, they think like, okay, those are my issues. Nobody else has to deal with them. But the reality is we bring our issues everywhere we go. And so everybody in our communities ends up having to deal with the issues that we haven't dealt with yet. And I find, it's just, communication is one of the hardest things that humans do or don't do. And so we need to find ways. So I think, like, starting to tell our truths, starting to say what's really going on that not everybody knows. I think it's really easy for people to assume everything is fine because nobody's talking about the pain, but actually, but we're all suffering, to some extent or other, like, even if you're fine, the person next to you isn't fine. And you have to deal with that situation. And so I just feel like we need some, like, collective giving a shit about other people, collective, I don't know, just like, let's just get naked and, like, talk about what's going on together in a way that's safe, so we can move on from this already, because it's exhausting. It's exhausting for people not to acknowledge that, acknowledge that we have a responsibility, all of us, to change and be better. I think, like, there are, for example, with this NFT thing, to bring up a controversial topic, I think a lot of people are thinking, well, why should I as an artist give a damn about, the environment when the oil people and all these other people have screwed it up to begin with, But, like, the point is that the system the capitalist system allowed them to do that, and it's wrong. I thought we all agreed that it was wrong until I got on Twitter and all the people I, care about are, NFTing it up, right? And so then it's just like, whoa, like, what's happening here? I thought we all had the same values, I thought we thought the environment and humans matter more than money. And so it's been a real challenge, I would say. And I know I'm not alone in this. And the thing is, I'm not trying to be an asshole when I talk about this topic, and I talk about, like, how climate change matters. But the thing is, I've been on Earth long enough to know when climate change wasn't an issue. Like, it wasn't not an issue, but it wasn't talked about and it wasn't understood. And so, and everything was different, I'm from Texas, and there were, there was no snow in Texas. There was no chaos and, like, storms and like freezing temperatures, killing people, in Texas. This is a thing that didn't happen in the past. And so I feel like, I mean, I don't know if it's an age thing, but it's like if some people were born into a system that was already messed up, then they take it for granted that it wasn't always like that, or that that issues that are here now weren't then. So people see a difference that maybe they haven't seen. And these things matter anyway. These things really matter. And I just want to get to a point where we're like talking about it and not hurting each other over it and not getting defensive over it. Just saying, these are the facts. Okay. These are the facts. What are we going to do? We're all caring people. What do we do?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting example. And I came across that over the past 3 days here and there, because, the question that you are touching on is whether we can have a conversation on topics such as NFT and really avoiding the ecological footprint or other topics that sit at the very core of our human survival. It's almost it is impossible to exclude that. So I think in many conversations we had, it became clear that something is demanded from us right now that that might be new for some people, and that is taking responsibility, showing more responsibility that we have done before, when we were maybe taught primarily to be a good worker and a good consumer, and when we were raised maybe in a more binary system. But now it's like we look in this world and we are facing a lot of complexity. So one of the things that popped up, like in many of the sessions, was the component of care work that you also mentioned, to establishing structures not only within online communities, but basically everywhere, where we understand ourselves and the responsibility of care that we all carry within us, because we have a social function. We have a function in the workplace. We have a function as friends, but also as people that inhabit the planet. So we can't simply take that away. And that might be one of the things for, I really hope, a future agenda of learning, where we simply have to get used to that, what has been excluded from the classic economic curriculum, this entire, entire component of care work, that's in front of us, and it really demands to be seen and to be integrated. And we also have I don't know if you're following the chat. Let me just look, because we have a comment here that maybe we can think a little bit about that. So there is a person saying there is no alternative to rethinking, right? This cannot mean designing the future with new words that have fancy prefixes, but the same terms and the same thinking. So, and this person also calls us to identify the terms that have no future value in them, like growth and wealth, or negative interest rates and so forth. But then there are other terms such as solidarity, leisure, work, must be grasped anew by reassuring ourselves of the primal phenomena in them. I think that's quite an interesting comment. Maybe you want to say something about that, Rachel?
Well, I was thinking about part of the thing is that with classes that I'm trying to do is, is help people to feel like whole human beings, which I feel like that if education had been set up that way from the very beginning, for us to do better than what happened in the past, for us to feel like good human beings who can contribute, then we wouldn't be having these conversations. But the education system, the political systems, they're all full of shit, let's be real. They're all just bullshit. And so, one of the things that I've started to get into is so usually what I would do is I would take a topic that's let's say machine learning, for example, but then I try to think about okay, what does machine learning have to do with being human? And so then this is the angle that I would take for a class, for example. And so, but more and more I'm interested in having the communication like more communication, so that I don't have to hide the fact that like what really matters are humans, and what really matters is learning to communicate with ourselves and others. And so I was just thinking the other day when I was talking with a friend that like I want to make, maybe I should make a school of forgiveness, or school of humans, or something like that. That's just basically about us dealing with everything that has got us to where we are, to where we, because you brought up care, and it made me think about how so many people don't feel cared for. They've never felt cared for, either by their family, by society. And I think, and there are colleagues now, and like, I feel like a lot of people think, and it makes sense too, if they've never felt cared for, why should they care for other people? And so, but it's like kind of undoing all of that, because we all deserve better, even though we didn't receive it. We didn't receive it from family or from school or from any of the systems that we're in. And so it's just, it's time to rethink all the things, and to say all the things and to let them go. Because, for example, I wish the gender in this day and age, and we're 2021, it's still a topic, and sexual harassment is still a topic, and all these things are still topics, they've been forever. And they're, I would like these topics to die, to get out of the way, so we can move on and do, more progressive work to lead us towards a better future. So when we die, people have better opportunities. But if we keep rehashing the same old conversations and never getting past anything and never really learning from them, we're going nowhere. So I'm really interested in this idea of like longevity and like conversations that kind of mutate over time, and you keep the thread alive. So, for example, we did recently, as part of the Vorspiel program this year, we did a small event called Please Don't Put Your Dick in My Face. And I think that a lot of people probably, anyone who saw that might have thought I'm just trying to be provocative or something like that. But the reality is, from sexual experiences from a young age, like there's just this situation where all of a sudden you find a dick in your face, no question, no conversation, even if you're in a loving relationship or whatever, whatever you call it, like loving, it's like, and that's like not appropriate, it's just, but it makes sense. Like I was imagining, being like a young teen boy or something, and you're like, whoa, and then you're with someone, and then you're like, yeah, and it's like, no, like just so the natural instincts of our human nature are leading us in the wrong way. And we need to talk about that, and we need to talk about everything around that. And one of the interesting things, the thread that came from that conversation was actually daddy issues. And so that's going to be the topic of conversation we're going to do. Like, I think the idea is to kind of do a monthly series, or a series of monthly conversations. And the next one is daddy issues, because actually so many of the things that came out of that conversation had to do with like fathers that were absent, fathers that didn't communicate, fathers that were withdrawn. And a lot of pain and suffering has come from this, and I think this is a very relevant conversation, because I think like some people will look at the things that I do and they might say, why are we talking about this? Your school is about technology, stick to that. Or like, how people say with sports or, celebrities, they're like, stick to your acting, stick to your sports. Why are you talking about this? But the reality is, anytime you want to bring humans together, human communication matters. Human experiences matter. Everything matters. And so we need to stop pretending that there's a place for one conversation, but not another, and to kind of like find a way together to move forward, because I want to evolve before I die. You know what I mean? And like my doctor says now that I'm like high risk, and I don't know what that means. It's scary for sure, for this vaccine, but I'm just like, I need to just keep going and trying to do good in the world and build community and be positive. And like, I need to see that before I die. So I'm like, people, please help me. Like, let's do this together. Like, let's move forward so we can all die in a better world than we were brought into.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's vital to bring these topics into the world of finance and money, because you could easily say, okay, guys, why don't you talk about money systems? Why don't you talk about your finance strategies, or empower people, I don't know, invest properly in impact funds, whatever. There are many ways, right, of being inclusive in the world of finance and money. But it's also my feeling, and I think this came through really well, that especially in a place such as MoneyLab, we have to talk about these things, because that's what defines us. That's also what defines us as consumers, as producers, as people participating in the economy. And I think what now more and more comes back into every domain of our life is this notion of the invisible work, of essential work, of care work, as I said before. And especially now in the pandemic, we've seen that, where nurses and other workers, so-called frontline workers, were considered essential. And no one really talked about them before. Imagine a conversation around money and finance where people might have talked about cleaners. I think it became clear during the COVID-19 pandemic that without people cleaning, we would basically all die, because their job is absolutely essential. Imagine public transport without cleaning, or clinics and so forth. So there are so many blind spots, in all aspects of economy or financial exchange, and that all it all ties into the discussion. So I'm on the one hand really happy to see that there is more and more space to include topics like that, more and more space to understand that in order to have a meaningful life, it's not just making tons of money and being financially successful, but also managing the other aspects of our lives, and that touch down on us as human beings, and it touches down on the relation we are forming and nurturing in our lives, and our capacity to communicate. And I often say it's amazing how humans that so much rely on communication, that they are so bad at it, that we still have to train ourselves in, I don't know, manipulation, rhetoric, whatever. And I think the communication is also something we talked also a lot about in our school, in our class that we did last year, right? And
Definitely.
what you just said, this call of human stories matter, right? And human, like every experience matters. That's for me, that's a really important thing. And I've seen it also over the course of this conference, because what it actually means is to get to a point where you closely watch and listen, and and look for ways to integrate that perspective into your own worldview, simply because it's out there and there is no way of ignoring it, even though it might be super easy to ignore it. But in an environment where it's about active listening and learning, you can't ignore. So I also think that calls for a lot of methodologies and a lot of teaching and knowledge transfer of how, to train people of how to get better there.
Well, one of the things with, I definitely agree, definitely, a billion times agree. And one of the things, so with the please don't put your dick in my face, like the idea was to practice micro truths, so like practice talking about the things that are difficult to talk about. And so I feel like giving people a platform to be able to practice talking about the difficult things. Maybe you don't say the whole thing. Maybe you just say a piece of the thing that has been troubling you for years, but I feel like giving people the opportunity to start to practice on communication, because it's, again, one of the hardest things in the world that humans do, and it's the most important. So, and also actually so I also have this kind of art collective project that started from a class that we did several years ago, and it's called The Quiets. And so the idea with The Quiets, it's basically like silent observation of a scenario and then creating artwork based on that scenario. So, so in the conversation we had the other night, please don't put your dick in my face. You have to say it, 3 times in a row. No, kidding. But anyway, the idea was that there would always be someone in the conversation room that was not speaking, and they were just jotting down whatever came to them, like, just like maybe it was who was talking the most, or like, the conversation flowed from this to that person to this, in this direction or whatever, or it could have been silences or, anything. And the idea was to just sit there and observe the conversation and not speak, and to create artwork out of what you observed. And I feel like, the people who took part in that, the people who were one of the quiets, said they got so much out of the experience, and they were thinking that it would be really interesting for future iterations that we invite people to take on that role as well. So like not our team of people, but actually anyone taking part can sign up to be one of the quiets, because you do learn so much from listening and holding back what you have to say and hearing the things. And like, yeah, because everybody needs a platform or space. Everybody needs space to speak their truth and listen to other people doing that. So I feel like in this way, I just want to keep doing this thing. I just feel like, but a lot of the things I do are really small scale, because I feel like it's important to keep an intimate conversation happening. So, because the thing you're going to say in front of like 3 to 5 people is not necessarily the thing you're going to say in front of 100. So I feel like if more and more people start to create opportunities for micro truths, for intimate communication, I feel like those kinds of things are really going to just make communities stronger and people healthier, more confident, stronger, and and it's just going to be better for everybody. So I wanted to mention that, because the topic has come up. It's like there are very playful ways to go about doing this. It doesn't have to be sitting in a group therapy session and like super, I don't know, awkward for some people or whatever. It doesn't have to be pain. It can be joyous, but it still needs to happen. It just needs to happen.
Rachel, my observation is that it's actually starting what you're talking about, providing space for personal stories and sharing of truths is something that even found its way into a lot of change management methodologies and frameworks, and highly paid consultants are already passing on that craft, that ancient craft, also in the corporate environment. And I think it's highly beneficial for the people working there. So, for instance, if you look at frameworks such as Theory U, that is, it's an interesting framework for accompanying change processes. There are elementary steps to be taken, and one of these protocols is to take a walk with another person, and it's really this training of deep listening and trying to understand what a person has to say. And it's not so much about finding a clever response, but just leaving it there and trusting that there will be ways of integrating that. So I think it's already happening, but it's happening in certain maybe elites or environments, but it's not happening everywhere, and that's the problem. And maybe this is only happening in rather privileged circles. I have no idea, but certainly it's not happening everywhere, because we know that there are still lots and lots of people that never have the privilege that someone is listening to them. So this is becoming a systemic thing, right? And just because a lot of people now have the understanding that we need to follow up on that and we need to become better on that, that still doesn't mean that we really practice that in everyday's life, because there are still so many domains, German bureaucracy, educational system, you just named them before, that are totally dysfunctional and where there's no any trace of that, right? So there's still tons of work to be done.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you pointed it out, but just to say that, like, because there are just many different, like, there's macro and micro, so there's like a way to be in the world that's just you with yourself, and then you with one other person, and then you with like 3 people, and then community, and then society, and then, and it just kind of like, so there are different levels of being, And I just feel like, people learned like one way to be or something like that. Like, and they think it's supposed to be the appropriate for each space, but yeah, there's just like, there's just nuance that we didn't have to learn more nuance and like how we are in one space. I don't know. And how we are in all the spaces matters really, but they're also, I guess it's more the point that like these things are all connected. How we are in the world everywhere is connected. And like, I think it's also interesting how people just have different personalities in different spaces. And in my mind, I don't understand that. I'm like, why don't you just be who you are everywhere you are? Like, I think like, I don't know, like why people do that, but I just think, I don't know, like because I think people think they have different responsibilities for different spaces, but I feel like our responsibility is to be who we are, and to do that well, figure out what that means, and then do it well and do it lovingly. And yeah, I don't know. I know these things are like, as we said, like they're not like cool topics, they're not like, this is not going to give me like cool points or like whatever, but like screw cool points, because I just want people to get real, like whatever that means for everybody. And I'm happy to discuss with people. I mean, I always put my email address on the bottom of the screen, because I'm like, I don't know, you have problems, write to me. Like, let's talk, right? I'm not a therapist, but like, I care. And sometimes that's more than a therapist, sometimes the therapist is just like, okay, I'm making my money, it's time for you to go. At least I'm a human who cares. And so I think we should all just, start like tattooing our email address or something. Just be like, let's talk, let's communicate. Here's space you don't have at other places. Find me or something.
Yeah, that's certainly something we're here for getting real. I think that's one of the primary things, and what I was also thinking, because you were just saying, oh, this is not a fancy topic, but it might be, but on the other hand, everything we are talking about here is inherently linked to organizational design. You can't talk org design without ignoring that. So this is a very important reminder for me. And it sort of rounds up the day in a really nice way, because when we started off this morning with Pekko from Economic Space Agency, we got a really nice introduction into game theory and organizational design. So he provided one component of how organizations come into existence. What we are talking about here is another component, but it's just as essential as any theories or any methodologies that are outside of these really hard to grasp human things. And I remember when we did the class last year, one of the major learnings for me was that in the future, we can't talk about organizing ourselves, about community building without mentioning all these components, because we are missing out on some elementary stuff otherwise. And we will get to a point where things will not function anymore. And what was also really interesting, this is also directly linked to us being in the digital space, because we also have to acknowledge that. That adds another layer of complexity about the choices we are using in terms of platform, but also protocols of behavior and listening and, all that. So if I remember this group of people, then we had a number of people that were engaged in community building or in setting up, groups and communities, And these people had a huge interest in getting organized. That was the primary topic. Mm-hmm. And it's the same interest that managers have, that investment bankers might have. I mean, it's this idea of, okay, let's get organized, right? We consider this as a really good thing. It's, I don't know whether there is someone out there who would say getting organized is connotated negatively. But then my point is, we have complete different understandings, each of us, what organization actually is and what it entails. Because you can organize systems in a way and you can leave, all the emotions outside. You can organize things in a pretty binary manner. But once you try to build diverse and inclusive, sustainable, cooperative systems, then you start entering the realm of the non-binary. And that's where all the complexity sits, right? And I think this is important to acknowledge also for this conference, that a lot of the things we have been talking about are completely non-binary and super complex. So what is it that we can offer, that the people in this community can offer to each other in order to tackle this complexity? So I just wanted to mention that, because that is organizational design at its very core. So I just look forward when this is included into a more official agenda.
Yeah, I would also just add that I remember, basically, Ela, I super love you. I think you know this already. I say this all the time, right? But I just remember, I love your way of facilitation, for example, where you care about who's in the room and you're like, how are you today? Because how we are today in a conversation with others matters. And you just have so much care when you're facilitating spaces, and you can tell that what people say matters. And I just think, there just needs to be more space in this space for this, because I feel like efficiency has become maybe, that question earlier from someone, efficiency should go out the window, because we're past efficiency. This is not about efficiency. If we're going to do efficiency, then we're just stuck in the same old systems. So, but we need to do better than efficiency. We need to hear people, see people and where they are. And I just always have thought you were a great example for this, because I always feel so heard and cared for, even before I knew you better than, as well as I do now. But and this is just so important, and so it's almost how do we clone the people who do it right, basically, or teach the people who aren't there yet how to be better at these things, because we just need more of it.
Thanks, Rachel. This is, it's very nice of you to say that. But I also have to say, I think I really had a great learning field, and that was Supermarkt the past 10 years, because I don't think I have ever been, I have always been like that, because it's a process, and maybe lots of other people who went through that community building and similar experiences themselves, they, including yourself, might have a similar experience. I think dealing with a lot of people and engaging in public spaces at some point make you really humble, because you understand that, as I said before, this was like an initial statement you made. It's not about ourselves. It's all about the people in the room and how they are and what they bring to the table, because that is what we are starting from today, that defines the conversation we're having. It defines the product we are designing. It basically designs each and everything. So I'm just sometimes surprised that I grew up in a world that totally neglected that and did not take that into account. And sometimes I have the feeling I'm just waking up from a long sleep and trying to see the reality of things, So yeah, Supermarkt was a great training field. And I also realized within the past year of not being able to run physical events that a big component of being with people in a space was missing. And it's really hard to craft that experience in a digital space. Even though there are possibilities, I wouldn't say it's completely impossible, but it's also, I think, that's an important dimension. And remember, we also discussed that in the class, how to really create a check-in culture, a caring culture within transnational communities where people simply cannot meet because they are too far away from each other, and how to manage that. I think that was a big thing we discussed. And it was also great that we had one part of the class was dedicated to methodologies of facilitation group work. And this is another thing I strongly believe when we talk about organizing. That's a key component, learning how to facilitate conversations and meetings and groups, like active listening and check-in and many of these things, because that's like the ground material we are starting from. Remember that it was a huge discussion we've had, how to establish that kind of culture in the digital realm.
Yeah,
and I know Ailey, because it's really interesting, just to finish with that, Ailey Rutherford, who is now in parallel running the workshop, the String Figures workshop, it's exactly dealing with that topic.
It's too bad I'm missing it now.
You know what? She told me that she was super sad because she really wanted to be part of that conversation. But yeah, we just had to time it that way. So, yeah.
Well, I wanted to pick up on one thing you said, because, I appreciate that you said, like, you didn't have this experience growing up. The way you're facilitating today is based on your learnings. And that is the point, because we're not magically these people who know what the hell we're doing, right? We've done it for so many years that we are, where we are, but everybody can learn it. That's really the point. It's like, no matter what your experiences have been in the past, you can be better, feel better, do better, care more, be, more present, and do all of the good things. So nobody's broken. I feel like that happens a lot. People think that, like, if they had some shitty experiences in the past, then they're broken, and then they're unfixable. And also too, I mean, I don't know, this whole other topic, but like, just, the kind of, the medical, industry that just gives someone a title. You have this ailment, you have this disease, you have this personality disorder, be gone with you, as if like that's our lot in life, And it's like, people can still heal depending, it doesn't matter what anybody told you that you may have, whether you have it or not, that's also a whole other thing. But it doesn't have to be a crutch that you live with forever, that like you can also get past these things and do better, feel better, and heal. And I just think that's, I don't know. I think that's the foundation of a community space, to get all these topics out before you talk about, like, look at this technology, download the API, download the software, whatever. We're going to work on this. Like, who are we? What do we care about? And knowing that it matters, knowing that each other know each other and it all matters. And then moving forward from there. I feel like that is just the foundation of like community organizing in 2021. And yeah, I want everybody to know it. So I really appreciate that having this conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. And I appreciate what you just brought up, because for me, it's a key component, because imagine a group of people meeting up, 20 people sitting in one room. This group is different all the time, right? So it's also something to acknowledge, like, we are all transformative beings. So that's why check-in culture is so important. Before you do anything, you just try to understand how everyone is and what are the issues bringing into the room. And only then you can get a sense of how to navigate the situation. And it's different every time. I nonetheless believe that there is a set of core values that can safely be pinned down in a code of conduct as a living as a living document, where people can add and where people can share experience. I think this is totally that's doable. But I would rather separate that from this constant flux that is happening within groups, where people make agreements and then they are unhappy, and then they wanna, they just wanna amend that a little bit. And that's another key component. And I remember we have also talked about that quite a lot. And that was the voting process as an instrument to figure out how to come to agreements, let's say, in the first place, as an instrument to come to agreements and to capture what people are thinking of certain things. And also this field requires a total different thinking from us, because it's not just about saying yes or no, but it's about this vast territory of yeah, maybe, or I don't know, I don't understand, because that's the reality, right? And very often this is completely overlooked. So that's yet another thing of getting organized. I think it's also really important to mention that.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting another one of the interesting things that came out of the class as well was, so I remember there's this whole like talk about DAOs and centralized autonomous organizations, and kind of this sexiness about it, like, ooh, we make decisions on the blockchain, and like, what's all that about? But I remember we were talking at the time about Lumio and its effectiveness as a tool, and how it's about transparency and understanding like the people around you and what they think and what they voted for and like their needs and this kind of thing. And then I asked you about, well, so what would be the difference between a DAO and something like Lumio as a tool? And you're like, with Lumio, who voted what and who cares about what. And with the DAO, you're like a key. You need to know each other's key, which is like impossible to memorize everybody's key. And it's anonymous. And it's just like, it's like an official vote, but like, who the hell is this person? Like, what the heck is going on? Was there communication? Like, so I just thought I just wanted to like get that in there as well, that all of these technologies are not like maybe well-intentioned, but they're not at a point of saving us yet, if they ever will be. So I think it's also important for people to think about tools that can be really useful for your communities that aren't all about the fucking blockchain. Okay. It's like, this is not the be all end all. Like this is the beginning, and a lot of work still has to be done. And in the meantime, we should be trying to like use other tools that are better equipped to deal with the realities of community.
Rachel, I would really like to hear from you where you currently stand with the School of Machines Making and Make-Believe. What are your next projects? How can people connect? Let us know.
Well, yeah, thanks for asking. So, I'm still doing online classes, and I have found I love the online classes, and I think the communities that are growing from them are super brilliant. So I'm definitely going to keep doing that. Although we have some hoping to do some like physical classes in Berlin in July, August, and September. But I wanted to mention, like, call out one class, which I do think is relevant, which is the money class, that is going to be a 10-week online experimental class. And it's intended for bringing marginalized communities up to speed with what's going on in this whole world of money. I see a lot of people that are like, ooh, NFTs, let's learn about NFTs, and it's like, okay, why are NFTs even here right now? Like, what is the history of money, past, present, future? What is capitalism, and what does it have to do with all this? What is corruption and decentralization, cooperative models? I mean, there are so many things to understand because in theory, I think NFTs, I think a lot of people are thinking of it as some utopic thing, but there's a foundation and a context I think we all have to understand in order to use it effectively, in order to, do we want better worlds or don't we, basically? It's like, are we just going to pretend that we want better worlds but not actually do the work to make it happen? Or are we going to put in the groundwork? And, let's look at like politicians. I would imagine like, you and I and everyone who attended here this weekend is, much more capable of handling like a political position, and much more able to think about others in a way that they don't seem capable of doing, because otherwise we wouldn't be in the messes that we are in. So it's just, we want to do better. Just don't forget, we want to do better. Well, I think we want to do better. Maybe that's the question. Do we want to do better? So we need to do things differently. And also, the main thing I want to get across is, again, I started with this, it's not about us. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's about all of us together. And that is the new mindset that we need to kind of cultivate, and we need to talk about it, and we need to, like, hopefully in the future, hug it out. What does this stuff mean? Why should we care? And like, I just
Well, Rachel, I'm pretty sure that your initiative and the school is a fantastic place to figure that out. And looking forward to our further collaboration. And I thank you so much for being here, because that also helped to, in some sense making of this entire conference and looking at things that came up. So that already was a great way of wrapping it up, but also sharing some experiences from the class last year. And I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for all the inspiring things you shared with us. And yeah.
Thank you.
I hope I'll see
hug.
you soon.
Group hug.
Big hug. Big hug. Bye,
Bye.
Rachel.
Bye.
See
Bye-bye.
you soon.